is aligned with their individual personal values. It's what I call the breakdown of the Batman Bruce Wayne paradox, where you make money by day and do good at night. People recognize that the real paradox of Batman is that Batman gets credit for fixing the problems that Wayne Enterprises was.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Actionable ESG Talk series brought to you by AKFI, Actionable Knowledge Foundational Institute, the world's first nonprofit industry consortium committed to bridging the gap between ESG, sustainability, and digital transformation. I'm Isabella, the co-host of this talk series, here with Manuel, another co-host, who is also the executive director at the AKFI, and our special guest today, John. How are you?
I am well, Isabella. Thank you so much. And how are you?
Very well. So glad to have you here today joining us. A little bit about John to our audience. John is with an international career spanning 3 decades. John is an award-winning ESG and sustainability leader who has helped global companies integrate their operational, financial, and cultural initiatives into sustainable and responsible business practices. He's also been instrumental in helping companies of all sizes rise to the top of the sustainability rankings for their respective sectors, including building materials, food service, and facilities management, and energy. Additionally, John has extensive experience helping organizations define long-term sustainability goals, which we love it. Just for a note here, especially as it relates to environmental stewardship, social progress, and sound governance practices. So glad to have you here, John, to talk about your long-term strategy and your social progress in all respect. Noel knows I'm a big person in social perspective, so let's get into the topic. Usually we start with a relatively broad question, as you probably saw from our previous seasons. What are your thoughts on the current state of the sustainability, ESG, and digital transformation trends in general? And how do you see them converging and emerging together?
Well, that's a big question, but it's very timely. So thank you for asking it, and thank you for having me. If you think of sustainability as the idea of a business strategy that allows for a business to sustain over a period of time, and ESG as the current focus on data, measurement, metrics, and reporting, that add the digital to it, which is a fantastic opportunity that we're starting to see, where people and companies are being asked to create large data sets of disparate information that comes from all places in their organization, bring it together, make sure it's complete, make sure it's accurate, do the proper calculations to, let's say, convert it to greenhouse gas emissions, and report on it in a way that is comparable, consistent, and decision useful for their stakeholders. And so the promise of digital is really, if you think about it right now, most companies, most popular software they use to add up and calculate this data is a program called Excel. Well, the larger and the more complex an organization is, the harder it is to make sure you don't have error creeping into the system. And that's where the digital transformation can really help, pulling, if you will, things like the electricity consumption by location for a large organization for each month, every month, so that rather than at the end of the reporting cycle, people going back and trying to determine if something's missing or inaccurate, in real time, people can figure out, oh, we're missing this data from this location, or this data from this location doesn't look right. And that can either lead to a check on the data, or it can help as a management tool for management to look at organizational effectiveness and efficiency and recognize that there might be a problem with some piece of equipment, for example, that might need maintenance or need to be replaced.
Thank you, John. Great summary. And I really like when you said ESG, it's about data, and sustainability, it's about strategy. because people have difficulties. They put ESG in strategy and they put sustainability in the data. And as you clearly stated, that will be a challenge with or without an Excel spreadsheet.
Well, but this is sort of the evolution of ESG and sustainability and corporate responsibility and purpose, which I've been part of and witnessed over the last several decades. What it really is these elements are being recognized more and more as being essentially part of the business. So regardless of what you call it, it's important to recognize that one day we're just going to call this business. Things like being an attractive employer have been part of companies' efforts for decades. But now there's starting to be a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion as a way to be an attractive employer. And of course, the data holds them accountable to, are they doing what they say they're doing, both as an external reporting exercise, but also as an internal management tool. Because if you truly want to be a great place to work, what's the best measurement to measure that? And the answer is longevity. How long do people stay with you and grow their careers with you versus jumping to another location for another opportunity? That is a key business metric that most organizations already track. But now it's under this umbrella term of ESG, but it's still just proper business management. And the same goes for organizational and operational effectiveness. It goes for good supplier relationships, and it goes for good customer loyalty and the ability to sell them products and services that customers want, which increasingly reflect the environmental, social, and sound governance aspects, particularly in the area of climate change. People want to know that companies are being responsible and favor them with their purchasing power when they have the economic means to choose.
That's great. And want to sort of take the conversation a little bit on a different direction. Because many people, we have students at AKFI, we have interns, we have new grads, and also we advise people in the middle of the career that they're asking, could I go to a sustainability career? What should I prepare for? So with your experience, I call it the pre-sustainability experience because as Isabella said at the beginning, with your experience, you started to work in sustainability before it became a popular and well recognized term. So starting with that, how do you see this process of transition or starting in the sustainability?
Well, certainly, pre-sustainability is a great phrase, even though the term was coined back in the late 1960s. It didn't really come into business parlance until around in the US, at least until, some point after the year 2000, which is when I started in this area. I started with degrees in communications and business, and that was my background and experience. And then this program or project came over from the European parent of the company I was working for at the time. And I was handed it by almost, okay, assign that one to John. So I started doing it. And I don't know why, but I quickly realized that the opportunity in this and the effectiveness of this as a real driver of culture and performance as well as reputation for a business or any organization. And so, there are degrees in sustainability now, but that didn't exist when I was coming up. And so a lot of the people that were involved in it at the early days didn't start out in sustainability. Some came from the environmental sciences portion of the business and environmental compliance. Some came from the social aspect and things like human resources. Some came from marketing because they saw the opportunity for marketing. Others came from investor relations because investors started to ask for it. And it started out as part of your job, and eventually it became the full job that we were doing. And so a lot of people in this space came from a lot of different places. And now, of course, we're seeing people with advanced degrees in sustainability.
Absolutely. And I know because of my work with Cornell, there are certificates in sustainability at Cornell, at MIT, at all the top universities, and also sustainability degrees from different organizations that are affiliated with sustainability topics. Thinking a little bit, I'm sure you have examples and sort of use cases or cases of people changing the career. How about one or two, of course, no names and places, but people that you know that they changed their career in the middle?
Well, if you think about it, any CEO or any corporate leader who's gotten involved in sustainability, unless they've gotten involved in it recently, probably made a pivot at some point in their career. So some of the leading names that we associate with sustainable businesses may or may not have started out there, because if they're, my age or older, when they first started, sustainability was not even on their radar. But I know people, I specifically could think of people who came to it from the communication side of it, the marketing, the PR. I know people who've come from it from human resources, got involved in things like the employee resource groups that companies were starting to create back in the 80s to bring people together with a like common interest or perspective. And those groups actually started out as groups of employees that would get together informally. And then at some point, the human resources departments, as part of their transition from personnel to human resources to now employee engagement, and you see how that evolution has happened since the 1970s in terms of the name of that discipline, they recognize getting involved in those employee resource groups, the power of teaching and respecting and understanding the commonalities and the differences of various groups within subcategories within their workforce. And that is what led to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. And so they come into it that way. So there's a lot of examples how as businesses have recognized that being a good environmental steward, being responsible and treating employees the way they want and deserve and need to be treated, as the expectation of employees has evolved from back when my father was working, where you went and worked for a company for 30 years, you got a pension and a gold watch at the end. Nowadays, that employee-employer contract has changed. Employees are looking for a place where they can work, where their everyday work is aligned with their individual personal values. It's what I call the breakdown of the Batman Bruce Wayne paradox, where you make money by day and do good at night. People recognize that the real paradox of Batman is that Batman gets credit for fixing the problems that Wayne Enterprises was creating during the day. Things like the Joker, who fell into a vat of toxic chemicals at Wayne Enterprises. There can be no better parallel to environmental malfeasance and creating a problem that then they have to go out and solve. So today, people want the two together. They want their vocation and their avocation to be aligned.
That's excellent. And, one of the challenges that employees face in companies are transformation challenges. And you touched at the beginning on the need of data and the need of digital transformation. And actually, employees are also pivoting, if you want, to understand. And now they have different tools. We can have a separate session about ChatGPT and so on. But they have different tools related to AI to get a better picture of the sustainability and the ESG performance of a company. So how do you see this fusion also inside the organizations? Do you see people not only pivoting on the transformation for sustainability, but also for digital transformation?
Well, absolutely, because you're right. People do their research. I'm sure that most people watching this, they're online right now. If they're considering a job change or a company, they're looking at what information is available online, but they're going deeper than just the sustainability report and the data that the company puts out. They're looking at companies at websites like Glassdoor and Indeed to find out what the company's employees are saying about their employee experience within that company. And so I often say good PR cannot overcome a bad reality. If you want to be a great place to work, to be perceived as a great place to work, there's a very simple way to do it. Be a great place to work. And then your employees and what they say about you, whether it's on a review on the internet or just across a garden fence or in a phone conversation or what they post on their Instagram or TikTok, will reflect their employee experience.
Absolutely. And connecting to the employees' experience is really a great way. We talked about people in the middle of the careers, but people at the start of the careers also are very eager to participate in sustainability and they bring with them the digital era. They're born with it.
If you're worried about what your employees are saying about you on social media, your problem is not social media. It's the way you're treating your employees.
Oh, that's a great line. And before we go to the next questions, but wanted to point that also Isabella is a author, and she published a book about a year ago about the digital mind of tomorrow, and the book is focused also on how this transformation of our way of thinking goes, and it's a book of questions. So she's a bestseller author. And I don't know if Isabella wants to add anything at this point on this conversation about sustainability and the future and the present and the future.
Of course, I'm not trying to say anything about my book. I wanted to comment on what John has been talking about, how to see things from their root cause, not just what seems like the problem, like the social media. That's just a reflection of some deep reason. And same with sustainability and any challenges we're facing today, ESG, digital transformation. Circling back of what I mentioned, if you remember, John, at the beginning, I'm a big person about social progress. I see this as a social movement because if we don't see it more than just an organizational management challenges, if you don't see it, it's a people challenge, then we're not facing the root cause and we're just fixing something with a band-aid. And it's not going to fundamentally change this in the long term. To me, this is, as I think you mentioned that as well, it's some problem we created from a long time neglection. And it's something that we finally has the awareness, to start paying attention to it, stop to taking it for granted. Oh, people, we'll manage them. But they're real people with emotions and we need to take care of them like a human, not like a machine or robots. So things like that. Thank you very much for bringing this to the topic and to have people hear about this.
Well, I think it's critical, right? I always thought the phrase human resources was an interesting one, right? Because it treats human resources like physical resources. And it doesn't, to get to exactly what you're talking about, is what you as an individual will want or need from an employer will be different from the person sitting next to you based on background, experience, culture, your own career, etc. And we can't have this sort of one-size-fits-all attitude toward our employees, because companies always say they want to attract, hire, retain, and I always add, engage the best employees. If you don't give them agency and empower them, then you have wasted your time and effort of getting the best people in the door. Because the best ideas, your employees have a choice. They can give the best idea to the company that listens to them and respects them, or work on it on their evenings and weekends and one day become your nearest competitor.
Right. You can't just win them without winning their heart.
Exactly.
There is a worse term, which is human capital, which, you reduce the human actually to the same, fixed capital and so on that you have on the balance sheet, right? I have human capital and I have, fixed assets.
Well, if you think about it, I wrote a piece about the difference between being treated as a valued asset and a valuable asset. Something that's valuable, you keep hidden, you put it in a safety deposit box, you protect it, but you don't let anyone see it. Something you value, you showcase, you put a spotlight on it. and you allow it to shine and you allow others to see how wonderful it is. And when companies say we treat our employees as valuable, it's different than valued. It's more than just a semantic difference, because one of the things I've seen is employees want the chance to, do that great thing and get credit for it and be recognized for it, not because of ego, but because it matters to them for their self-realization.
The search of meaning, the search of being a full person, as Isabella and you also mentioned, right?
Exactly.
People are not machines; they are not robots, and that's what AI will fall short for a long time.
Well, technology always needs the human element, right? If we rely 100% on technology, we've seen where that gets us. If you think about, it's an overused analogy, but the Titanic had the latest, greatest technology, but it was the human element that failed time and time again and turned that into a tragedy.
Absolutely. Actually, taking shortcuts, which happens many times in in the corner offices of different businesses. And on this idea, actually, how do you see sustainability? You work for top corporations, actually globally, right? In Europe, in the US. How do you see the sustainability in the corner office versus the employees' desires?
Well, the interesting thing is what I've discovered in a lot of organizations, and the bigger the organization, the more I see this, is you've got the employees at the front line or the grassroots level who care passionately about it. You often have leadership that cares about it. But what you don't have is people, and this is the role that I have stepped into, which is helping companies bridge the gap in the middle management and the day-to-day operations to understand how the vision of the CEO aligns with the values of the employees, often who came to the company because of the vision of the CEO in the day-to-day operation of that company. To be successful, and this is part of a book I wrote, there are 5 key elements for sustainability. The first one, it has to align with the overall strategy of the organization. But the second one is it has to be compatible with the day-to-day reality of the organization, the way it's run every day. You can't just do good Thursdays. You have to do it all the time. You need to empower and engage employees at all levels of the company. And I first wrote that back in 2003. And we're seeing that more and more as today's workers want that and are demanding it. And again, this is where I saw it coming early, and I'm not sure why. The fourth element is measurable, tangible results that you can point to as proof points that you're doing what you say you're doing and that you're having the impact and results that you say you want to be having. So it's not just about how many hours of safety training, for example, you're giving your employees, but has the accident rate gone down? And the last thing is to engage with your stakeholders throughout the process. And that can be everyone from employees, customers, investors, so they understand what you're doing, why you're doing, and what's reasonable to expect from your organization. I'll give a great example. If you commit to having a diverse board that's gender diversity is roughly 50-50, but you have people currently on your board serving terms, you might not be able to say, okay, we're going to be 50-50 by next year, because you can't kick people off your board who are serving, let's say, a 3-year term until the end of their term expires. You can't fire them or send them off because of their gender, even as you're working toward a better balance of gender on your board. And that's a perfect example where you explain why you're making progress over time versus just an instant transformation. And stakeholders understand that. I can't fire my board because they don't match the vision of what we have for our board in the future, but here's our plan to get there. And by this year, we will have achieved this milestone. And by that year, we'll have achieved the result. And then we'll maintain it.
And I should, based on my experience, at least, I can say that it's a book about change management.
Yes.
You cannot take a big ship and turn it on a dime, right? Even if the captain says, all the way to, the right or to the left, will take time. You mentioned the Titanic. This is how it failed. It's not
Well,
from not saying the iceberg, it's from not reacting on time.
Well, I mean, we could discuss all the errors that they made. Going back to expecting compliance with the regulations, which was they had actually something like 20% more lifeboats than were required by regulations, but ships had gotten larger, and the regulation was based on tonnage, not by passengers. And so, conforming to the regulations will never make you a leader, and in some cases, will put you at tremendous risk. Look what happened. I mean, the human tragedy aside, the White Star Line no longer exists for a reason.
Very clearly. And, I definitely want to invite you back. We have a relatively limited time, so I'll turn to Isabella for our final question for today. And maybe next time we talk about supply chains and errors in the supply chains. And this is a big topic as well, because supply chains now are subject to a large number of regulations, misaligned, not aligned, and there are actually struggling to figure out how to function in the new world of sustainability.
Well, I'll just mention this about supply chains because I think it's a very critical topic. If you think about it, your company can have a commitment to a certain set of values, but if you don't use those same values when you choose how to spend your money in terms of who you use as a supplier, it's hypocritical to ask your customers to spend their money with you based on values that you don't use when you're making your own purchasing decisions.
So I think you say
will feel so overwhelmed if they heard what you just said, John, because it's so true and it's so in the reality right now.
I'm glad I got something right today.
more than once. John, actually, what you're saying, supply chain is no longer only a value chain, it's also a values chain. Again, a small s at the end, but a big change in the direction of sharing the values across and along the supply chains. So definitely we'll go for a second interview.
Yeah, and you also pointed out a very critical thing. I don't know if you know how critical I think it is, then you realize it's the middle management. It's the gap between what actually can be the vision from the CEO and the people who wants to follow that vision. The block or whatever, the gap in between is the middle management. So that might be the breaking point for the sustainability movement if we really wanted to change something, because people in that group has a very different mentality and they have their own specific goals, and they probably can capture fully what the CEO's vision is, but they also don't know how to nurture the people to follow. So there's a lot to solve in the middle management part, and we've heard about with Manuel, with other guests many times. That's literally where all the problems seems arising since this issue has been happening. And that also explains maybe why smaller teams, I've heard personally several times, smaller teams like smaller businesses, they've done actually much greater job in ESG, in team management, people staying with them for decades. They're like a family because they know how to, do things align with their vision and taking care of them as a human, which the middle management probably has some difficulty to accomplish that. So I really think that's a great point for all of us to think how to work on that, maybe for the future professionals in the sustainability field to think about it, to solve it. So to end our conversation, I'm sure you have some advice for our future sustainability professionals and the younger generations who wants to do something in this field. Please share with us your thoughts.
Yes, sure. So it really comes down to two things that I think are critical. The first is, no matter how much you're educated, no matter how much you've learned, stay humble, because this is an evolving rapidly changing space, and what you knew yesterday may be not just outdated tomorrow, it may be contradicted tomorrow. And the other one is stay curious, stay flexible, be willing to pivot, change, evolve, learn, and grow, because it's a fascinating but dynamic field. It's changing as fast as your iPhone is. And if you're going to be successful, and it's not like some of the other careers where a skill that you develop in school is the skill that will carry you through. Adaptability is key.
Thank you. This not only applies to sustainability professionals for the future, it applies to all of us. I love it. I think this is the one of the golden message all of us should. I think we've heard many times. We need to remind us, really practicing it, because it's really hard to change and to fit into this very dynamic digital age.
Change is a core competency, the ability to embrace it. I worked with a CEO who used to reorganize the organization every 6 months. And someone said, it seems like you're changing for change's sake. And he said, I am, because if we do not become masters of change, change will master us.
Love it. That should be our message of the day. We're going to highlight this maybe in our description or somewhere, and to share with our audience. If we don't manage change, they're going to manage us.
Universities are starting to offer certificates in change management, actually. But I don't like change management because it's about management. It's not about the change itself. The change is intrinsical to people. It cannot be just turned on and off by a person or another.
Yes. Well, I love it. We talk about a lot of facts, a lot of challenges, but overall, I see also a lot of hope. I really see this as a global shift, not just within the States. It's also in other countries. It's really a social change to me that everybody started to realizing and taking action upon. So let's continue this discussion. Love to have you back, John. Thank you for taking the time, and thank you to all of our audience as well for joining us today. Make sure you tune in every week for a new episode of AKFI's Actionable ESG Talk series, and where you can gain new perspective on how to mitigate risk and create value. Not yet, Manuel. You waved too early. And create value by integrating ESG and digital transformation. Thank you both, and thank you all. Now it's the time. Bye for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.